Hi, storytellers. I'm back. This time I thought I would talk about how to write a fiction series. And so I thought I'd do, I don't know, a few videos. I'm not exactly sure how many yet, but just to help explain, the process to writing a fiction series, I thought that might be helpful. And this kind of perked my interest because I'm writing a different type of series right now. And I just finished book one in this women's fiction clean romance, but it's different kind of series than my other like my cowboy series or my billionaire clean romance series, or even my Kanada's True North series. I thought this might be helpful if it'll help me as much as it'll help you. I hope it helps you. So I thought I'd explain, the different types of series. As far as in my research, I came across 3 different types of series, and I'll link to blog posts that will hopefully help explain it better than I can. I'll link to that below in the description below, and hopefully that'll help you. The 3 different types of series in a fiction series. This first one is each book stands alone, so a reader can read them in any order without losing, important information. Sometimes this is called a static or a standalone series. I think there's many different names for it. In my research, that's kind of what I came across. For example, you might have heard of the books starring the character Jack Reacher, written by Lee Child. And so Jack is an ex-military cop who finds a way to bring the bad guys to justice. And so for readers of this type of series, these books can be read out of order. So readers could start reading book, say, number 8 in the series, and they would still understand the story. Often this type of standalone series will share the same setting or family, or even some of the characters. Each book could have a different main character. It doesn't necessarily have to. For example, in the James Bond series, there's always James Bond, right? And what's the guy that Q? I think he's the guy that's always inventing things, right? So these are sort of characters that are in each book in the James Bond series, but they can be read, all by themselves. They're a story all by themselves. So I hope that helps to explain that better. I was just thinking, as an example, my billionaire clean romance series and actually my cowboy clean romance series, each book can be read all by itself, but in each book there's like a new hero and heroine, because it follows the story of brothers, right? And brothers who, eventually get married in each book. Each book is a happily ever after, but each book is kind of like a standalone. But it does follow, I guess, a family, and in both it follows a similar setting too. So in this type of series, you only need to plan out each book as you write it. You wouldn't have to plan out the whole, like across the whole series. Like if you're writing 7 books, you wouldn't have to plan all 7 books in this when you're writing this type of series, which makes it easier on the writer. So generally speaking, the characters are in this type of series are slow in their transformation, because characters change and grow, right? But in this type of series, often they're slower in their growth and transformation. Like throughout the series, right? But the readers can read the books out of order, which readers often like that, and it helps to keep your characters consistent. This is kind of especially with readers, they like it when you keep your characters consistent. So if you can keep notes, like in a journal or even on an online page, or some people like to use Trello. That works pretty good. But you can keep your notes of, what do the characters look like, their hair, their eyes, their body build, just everything about your character, and also the setting too. That'll be important, especially if you're writing fantasy. Maybe you're writing fantasy or sci-fi. Often the world building is a bit more complicated, right? In those, as it should be, because you're writing a whole different world, right? Like Lord of the Rings or Narnia series. I can only imagine the type of notes they kept, as authors, trying to figure out all the details, right, that they had to keep track of. But it does help to keep everything consistent if you can write it down somewhere. So that's and I think this goes across all series. It is helpful, all different types of series, to keep notes. The second type of series that I came across is each book works alone. So all on its own, it's a story, but they also combine into a larger story. So the readers most likely would want to read the books in order, even though it's not absolutely necessary. Sometimes this can be called a hybrid or an episodic series. Each book in this series has its own story. In each book, there's a lot going on with interpersonal relationships between characters, and there's a much bigger storyline that goes across all the books in the series. So if you start reading say book 6 in the series, you might miss some of the bigger overarching story that maybe you would have caught from book 1 and book 2. So, it's kind of be helpful to read the books in order, but it's not necessary. This is kind of what I'm writing now with my women's fiction clean romance. It's more like, as I was researching this, I didn't know this before, but I realized this is actually an episodic series because it's all set, as you can tell by the title in the book, it's set on Martha's Vineyard. But so each book is about each sister, right? There's 7 sisters, so there's 7 books. But each book has its own mystery, which gets solved by the end of each book. But there's this overarching mystery and overarching, a bigger villain that we're going to find in book 6 and book 7. And so stay tuned. But I'm not gonna give you any spoilers. But it looks like this is what I'm writing. This is the idea that came to me, but I didn't realize what it was called. I just knew that the books were interconnected more so than, say, my cowboy series. And so this, I guess, is what I'm writing. So in this type of series, each book makes a great story all by itself, and yet each novel is a part of a larger series of books, but they're related to each other. Another example, of course, would be Harry Potter series. In each book, Harry faces new challenges, has some wins. However, each time he wins, there's a bigger revealing of a bigger battle and a bigger enemy that he will have to face, which makes readers then want to come back for the next book, right? And so this type of story means you need to plan out the story of each book, and you have to plan the larger story for all, like in my case, all 7 books. My other series it actually is my Red Maple Creek series, which is my middle grade. Canada's True North was book number 1. I'm not sure if this fits into this category or into the next one. But they are definitely very interconnected, all the stories, right? And they're going to have to, Canada, of course, will have to face a bigger villain coming to book 6 and book 7 in this series. So I'm still trying to work that out, what type of series that one is. But anyway, back to this one. So in this type of episodic series, you'll have a standalone mystery for each book, but there's also an overarching mystery to solve, like overall, whatever you're writing, 7 books. In my case, it would be 7 books. So, for example, by the last book in the series, the main characters will have to face the big villain, right? And so, again, this is going to be important to keep a series Bible, and also important to have a synopsis, sort of like a quick summary, and a scene list for each separate book in the series. And then you'll want to have a separate summary for the series as a whole. Now, as I've been realizing, doing this type of series is more work, but the advantage can be that if your reader loves book 1, they will want to read the rest of the books in the series, and that it's really helps because one book will promote the next book, right? If it really engages readers. So that's that type of series. So that's the episodic series. This next one, this last one is so number 3, each book is just one chunk of a single large story. So a reader must read them all exactly in order or they won't understand the story as a whole. So an example of this would be Lord of the Rings. In fact, and I hadn't realized this, but this is part of my research, is that J.R.R. Tolkien, I'm not sure how to say his name, but he actually wrote it as one long, it must have been really long, story, but the publisher decided to divide it into 3 books. See, now there's a little tidbit I didn't realize. In my research, I realized that. And so this type of story, like The Lord of the Rings, needs planning, and it's often just a really, really long book, right? And sometimes this is called a sequential or a dynamic series. It's a series that is a continuing story arc that goes across many books. In this type of series, it's important for readers to read the books in order, right? Or if you start at book 4, you might not understand book 1 because there was so much information, book 1 and book 2, that by the time you got to book 4, you're kind of feeling lost. This type of series. And so characters have a lot of growth from book 1 to, say, book 7, for example. And there's some bigger plot issues that go on from all the way from book 1 to the last book in the series. Each book will have a resolution, but it will also have a cliffhanger. You see this in Divergent, that each book has a resolution. It does come to a resolution, but there's also a cliffhanger, which compels readers to want to get the next book, right? Which is kind of the idea. And so the bigger your story, the more characters and setting, etc., that you need to keep track of. And it's possible that some readers will want to keep reading after they finish book 1. Still other readers, I hope that's the case, still other readers might get upset when they reach the end of book 1 and realize, oh man, things only got worse, for my main character, or for the main character, and they, and maybe they don't realize that the story continues in book number 2. Even in your marketing, you might want to explain that this is a continuing series, that the books, the story's not done when they finish book 1, although book 1 should have its own, there should be still a conclusion to the book 1 story, but that there's a cliffhanger that takes readers, compels them to pick up book number 2. That's kind of the idea with this kind of series. So I hope that helps you to understand the different types of series that you can write. A question to ask yourself is, should you write a series? There's some pros and cons. Some cons would be, depending on what type of fiction series you want to write, it can be a lot more work because you need to figure out each story as well as an overarching storyline. But there are a lot of pros too. A fiction series can basically, promote itself because, number 1, at the end of each book, you write a short blurb that compels readers to the next book. In an ebook, you can add a link to the sales page for the next book in the series. And I've done that with each of my books, with my Billionaire series as well as my Cowboy series. And so that's helpful because if readers want to read the next book, it's right there. In an ebook, you can do that. And now, of course, a print book, they'll have to, physically find it on their computer and go try to find the next book in the series. Another pro is number 2. Readers who read one book in the series may click a link at the back of the book to go to your website, and readers can sign up for your newsletter. And in this way, every time you publish a new book, your readers will see it and be aware of it. So that's helpful. And then number 3, this works actually with if your books are on Amazon. When you have a fiction series, Amazon will show other books in your series to your readers. Readers that say bought book number 1 or book number 2, they'll show other books in that series to readers. And you might even, readers might even get an email from Amazon that says, you may also like, and then your book, the next one in the series, might be included in that email, which is very helpful. It's helpful for you if Amazon's promoting your next book. And so those are pros and cons. As an indie author, I have found it really helpful to write books in a series, because I find that readers like to come back and to come back again. If they like book 1 or book 2, they'll keep coming back. This is what I have found. And so I encourage you to try writing a series. You don't have to do the real complicated, kind of series, which I feel like I'm kind of doing right now with this women's fiction. But you can do a standalone series. Those actually are not that hard to write, because it's a standalone book. Each book is standalone, and they're just connected by setting. So that's actually an easier type of series to write. So I'd encourage you to, try writing a series. It'll just expand you as a fiction writer, but it'll also attract more readers. So I hope that helped you. The next video in this series, I think we're going to dive into planning, how to plan a fiction series. And so I hope you stay tuned and for the next video in this series, for video number 2 in the series. And meanwhile, happy writing, and I hope you have fun as you plan out all the books in your series. See you next time.